Hello, my beautiful people. I'm your host, Andrea, and welcome back to another episode of Limitless AF, the podcast where we break limits, step into our power, and create lives that are unapologetically ours. Now, I'm about to wake you up for sure in today's episode, and I'm starting right here in the beginning. People don't take advantage of you by accident. They follow the standard you keep allowing. I want you to let that sink in for a second before you decide how you feel about it, because that sentence makes a lot of women uncomfortable, not because it's untrue, but because it removes the villain. And when the villain disappears, responsibility shows up. Now, before you tense up, let me be clear. This isn't about blame. This isn't about shaming yourself. This isn't about replaying every decision you've ever made and beating yourself up for it. This is about clarity, and clarity doesn't arrive gently. It arrives when you stop negotiating with yourself. So, let's get into it. Most women already know when something isn't right because you feel it long before you admit it. You know when a relationship has shifted, when you're over-functioning, when someone is giving you just enough to keep you around but not enough to actually meet you. And you definitely know when you're explaining yourself for the 10th time and nothing is changing. And yet, you stay. You tell yourself you're being patient or you're being understanding. You even tell yourself you're being a good partner, a good parent, or a good woman. But what you're really doing is tolerating something you already know doesn't sit right and calling it confusion so you don't have to make a decision. That's the part we don't like to talk about. Because saying, I didn't know, feels safer than saying, I knew, but I just didn't want to deal with the consequences. Patterns don't persist because they're hidden. They persist because they're allowed. Now let's clear something up real quick. Most people in your life are not waking up in the morning plotting how to take advantage of you. They're not sitting around thinking, how can I drain her today? They're responding to what's been permitted. They follow the standard you keep allowing. If you keep explaining instead of deciding, people learn they don't have to change. If you keep rescuing, people learn they don't have to take responsibility. And if you keep staying after being disrespected, people learn you'll stay, no matter how little they give or how fucked up they treat you. Not because they're evil, but because humans adapt to what's tolerated. And this is where a lot of women get stuck because they think the problem is boundaries, and it's definitely not. Now, boundaries are external. Standards are internal. A boundary is what you say, but a standard is what you enforce, even when no one is watching. You can say you have a boundary all day long, but if your standard is shaky, the boundary will collapse the second you're tired, lonely, or afraid of conflict. This is why so many women say, I set boundaries, but they don't work. Girl, they don't work because boundaries can't compensate for a standard you don't fully believe you're allowed to have. Standards don't require speeches. They don't require long explanations. They show up in what you stop participating in. And that's where things get really uncomfortable. See, most women already know they're worthy because they've read the books, they've done the affirmations, they've had the conversations, and they intellectually understand that they deserve more. But worth that lives only in your head and not in your behavior becomes self-betrayal. See, listen, every time you say, I know my worth, but continue to tolerate what contradicts it, your nervous system believes the behavior, not the belief. Worth isn't what you say about yourself in private, it's what you stop tolerating in real life. And when there's a gap between what you believe and how you live, that gap shows up as resentment, exhaustion, and confusion. Not because you're broken, but because something in you knows you're out of alignment. This shows up everywhere. It shows up when you're enabling a grown adult in your house and calling it love. It shows up when you stay in a relationship that's already shown you who it is. It shows up when you keep the peace at your own expense. And it shows up when you explain, justify, and soften so you're not seen as too much. At some point, we have to be honest. If a dynamic has been happening for years, it's not a misunderstanding. It's a standard that you set. And standards don't change through conversation alone. They change through action. Now listen carefully because this matters. Ownership is not punishment, responsibility is not shame, and clarity is not cruelty. Recognizing your role in what you've allowed is not about attacking yourself. It's not about replaying the past or making yourself wrong for what you didn't know how to do then. It's about reclaiming your power now. Because the moment you realize, I've been allowing this, you also realize something just as important. I don't have to do that shit anymore. That's the part most women skip over. They hear responsibility and immediately turn it into self-attack. They turn awareness into a courtroom. They start prosecuting themselves for staying too long, giving too much, explaining too often, and that does nothing but keep them stuck in the same pattern, just with better language. Ownership isn't about beating yourself up. It's about telling the truth without flinching. It's about saying, this made sense to me once, but it doesn't anymore. It's about acknowledging that you tolerated what you tolerated because you were protecting something. Your peace, connection, stability, identity, and realizing you no longer need to pay that price anymore. That's not weakness, that's growth. And this is where authority actually lives. See, authority doesn't yell, it doesn't perform, it doesn't explain itself into exhaustion, it doesn't beg to be understood or validated. Authority is quiet. It's steady. It decides. It stops renegotiating with itself. It stops hoping behavior will change without consequence. It stops waiting for clarity to feel comfortable before moving. Authority doesn't make dramatic announcements. It just moves differently. And that's when everything starts to change. All right, my loves, I know that I just gave you some hard-hitting truths. So if it hit home for you, don't rush to fix anything today. Don't confront anyone. Don't make dramatic declarations. Just take notice. Notice where you've been explaining instead of deciding. Notice where you've been tolerating what you already know isn't okay. Because as I said in the beginning of this episode, people don't take advantage of you by accident. They follow the standard you keep allowing. So I'll catch you next time on Limitless AF. Until then, pay attention, stop explaining, and let your standards speak. And always remember, you are limitless, you are fierce, and honey, there's nothing you can't do.